Hi, everybody. It is May 28th, 2026. Today, we're covering the Iran war, everything that's new in the news when it comes to Hormuz, and Peter Thiel's escape from America, everything he is saying after building a lot of the tech oligarch that we see today. We're going to analyze the maritime traffic, flight tracking, and everything that's going on in the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, the Red Sea, and really the Ukraine war, everything that we can possibly cover on the stream. Got to be careful about what we cover because it's getting hot out there. And what I mean is that it's getting, again, the censorship and all of it, it's getting tight. It's getting hard to discuss some of these issues, so we're going to have to be lighter on some of these subjects, but I'm going to try to be a little bit more professional about the way we cover these issues. Because, again, as this war ramps up, again, the Israel-Lebanon war, all of these things, very sensitive topics, right? But we're going to try to cover it all, and we're going to see what is actually new with all the developments, patterns, and everything that's changed. So be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, support the show, support the information, and let's get right into it. So again, some of the biggest news today, live updates: Iran and U.S. trade strikes accuse each other of violating the truce.
Was a huge topic of discussion at the White House earlier today, where President Trump held his 11th public cabinet meeting of his second term. We're going to break down the very latest from Iran in just a second. But first, here's what the president and Secretary Marco Rubio said about the status of negotiations before these new strikes.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We're not satisfied with it, but we will be.
There's an agreement to be made. We want that to be made. I think there's been some progress and some interest, and we'll see over the next few hours and days whether progress could be made.
And then after that, motioning over to Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth to his left, Trump said this.
They are starting to give us the things that they have to give us, and if they do, that's great. And if they won't, then the man on my left is going to finish them off.
Finish them off.
Well, let's bring in NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez for the very latest. Gabe, this announcement, this came just minutes ago about this attack. What do we know?
Well, yes, Scotty. According to a U.S. official, the U.S. military conducting this latest round of attacks on incoming Iranian drones, as well as one ground control station in southern Iran. Now, Gotti, we should point out this does not mean that the fragile ceasefire is over, or that there has been a resumption of major combat operations. To the contrary, according to this official,
we've been saying this war is going to go on and on.
Is still in effect, but this latest round of strikes was defensive in nature. And Gotti, we had heard that several days ago. I believe on Monday, the Central Command, U.S. Central Command, had said the same thing, that the U.S. had conducted some defensive operations. But it really raises the question, doesn't it? Where are we in this ceasefire if every few days there is this resumption of even minor attacks, shooting down some drones?
That's what everybody's wondering.
Trying to take out any ground control stations or any individual ships. The U.S. is trying to make the case that these are one-offs, but that negotiations are continuing. And certainly that's what we heard from President Trump and his top administration officials today right here at the White House during that cabinet meeting that you mentioned, another marathon cabinet meeting, where we heard the president reiterate that he would not accept what he calls a, quote, crummy agreement, and he was instructing his team to continue negotiations. And there was a lot of back and forth today about what exactly those negotiations entail, with Iranian state TV putting forth this draft proposal, this draft memorandum of understanding that it said was the framework or an outline of a framework of a potential deal. And then the White House came back and said just a few hours later that it was a complete fabrication. So a lot of questions about where we are in these negotiations. But again, that breaking news, we're now learning another round of very limited strikes, according to a U.S. official, to take out some Iranian drones and this ground control station in southern Iran, Gotti.
And just to put this into context, I mean, this ceasefire has been going on for quite some time. There were strikes over the weekend that were very similar to this, right?
Yes, that's right. Over the weekend and into Monday, the U.S. had struck, I believe it was these southern Iran. They were boats attempting to lay mines as well as missile launch sites. That's what Central Command had said at the time. And really, again, the U.S. is trying to make the case that these are small one-offs and, not the first time that there had been some minor exchange of fire here. But according to that U.S. official in this latest round of strikes, that no military or civilian targets were hit. So again, this is not an interruption of that ceasefire, but it does raise questions about where we go from here and whether these negotiations will ultimately prove fruitful. These negotiations, of course, that are ongoing even as both the U.S. and Iran interact with these minor strikes against either drones or these missile launch sites, Scotty.
Yeah, very fiery for a ceasefire. I do want to play a little bit more from the president when he was asked about how the war in Iran could possibly impact midterm elections here at home. Let's listen to that.
I don't care about the midterms. Look what happened last night.
Again, this was yesterday.
The prelude to the
But we're
midterm.
covering some of this again because, again, we have to reiterate the importance of this meeting and how America and the Iranians, the IRGC, continue to go back and forth with these strikes. And it doesn't look like there's any sign of this ceasefire really maintaining. And at this point, it appears that everything is going to continue going on when it comes to this Iran war.
People understand that. They know that. Very simple. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
So the president there saying that he sees last night as a big win for him, but set the playing field for us here.
Yeah, and Gotti, look, this is the president pointing to that resounding landslide victory in Texas last night during that Senate primary by his chosen candidate, the candidate he endorsed, the Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, defeated the long-term incumbent.
I love Ken Paxton. He's definitely
John
America
Cornyn.
first.
The president seeing this as a major victory, but his comments there raising a lot of eyebrows in Washington and really among Republicans across the country who are wondering whether the president is not really realizing that it could be difficult for Republicans to hold control of Congress, especially with comments like that, Gotti.
Yeah, so much to keep track
Pretty
of.
wild.
NBC's gave.
So again, that was today at 6:12 p.m. that was released. But again, they were just highlighting some of those clips that we've been seeing over the past few days. This is a clip from Alex Barnicoat kind of covering the war and everything that's going on with that. So again, what do you think? Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe if this information is valuable to you. So again, let's take a look. This is what happened today in Iran and this entire war.
Some breaking news. Iran has bombed the American military base in Kuwait. Iran said, quote, following this morning's aggression by the US military, the American airbase that served as the source of the attack was targeted. And that's important because it comes in response to the US bombing Iran this morning. Specifically, the US bombed the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. This is the second time the US has bombed Iran in 3 days, and now Iran has responded. 2 days ago, when the US carried out their first wave of strikes, Iran attempted to shoot down one of the fighter jets, and they successfully shot down one of the drones. This time, Iran didn't do that. They took it a step further, and as I've said, they've now bombed the American base that carried out the attack this morning that's in Kuwait. Because of these last 3 days, there's now just a 42% chance that Iran and the US sign a permanent peace deal by the end of next month. But these strikes today also tell us that Kuwait did not learn from the war, and they're still allowing the US to use their territory to carry out strikes. The US did the usual and said that those strikes were in self-defense against Iran this morning. However, that doesn't really hold up. So they might be back at war already, but there is something important. On these videos, I got 300 million views last month, and I'm now offering one-on-one social media coaching.
Very interesting.
If you're serious
so
about
at the end of the day,
growing on
that's
social
Alex
media, you can
Barnicoat.
learn
Give
from
him
the
a follow. He's been following the war and everything that we've been seeing in the algorithms. And at the same time, we also have all of this other news. Iran war live updates. U.S. officials say they are closing in on an agreement to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. This was updated just 1 hour ago. President Trump has not signed off on the emergency framework, according to the U.S. officials, but it could set the table for extending the ceasefire and more substantive negotiations. So again, when we look at this, U.S. officials are closing in on the framework for negotiations with Iran that could extend the ceasefire to lead to reopening the Strait of Hormuz and set the table for more substantive talks, according to 3 U.S. officials with the knowledge of the discussions. Mr. Trump has not signed off on the emerging framework, and it was not clear if it matched Iran's understanding. The development was the latest twist in a week that began the U.S. and Iranian officials signaling progress in talks, then saw military skirmishes rattle in the region as President Trump asserted that he felt no political pressure to reach an agreement. Very interesting. Okay, when we look at all of this, this war is only going to continue on. We've been saying that for a long time. I've been saying this for months now. And again, with this back and forth talk with the IRGC in the United States, again, we continue getting retaliation strikes, and they want the terms, right? Trump wants Iran to have no more nuclear enrichment, no nuclear program, does not want to lift the sanctions, and then the Iranians are demanding that the sanctions are lifted, that the Iranians control the Strait of Hormuz, and that essentially they would be allowed to enrich, nuclear missiles, and they would be able to have nuclear. And so both sides are completely not giving in to these negotiations, so this war is only continuing on because of it. Now, what's interesting is that Trump had tried to make these Abraham Accord deals between the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and all of the other countries, Jordan. They were all willing to sign this peace agreement. But it seems that the only country who is not willing to sign this agreement as of this current time, based on the data and based on everything that statements have been saying by Prime Minister Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir, they had said that they were not interested in ending this war with Iran and that they do intend to proceed with this war. So very interesting. Again, Donald Trump shares draft Iran agreement with Israel and other allies. U.S. President's move comes after both sides try to prevent fresh ceasefire breaches, scuppering a potential deal. Donald Trump has circulated a draft peace agreement for the war with Iran among allies, including Israel, as both sides try to prevent fresh breaches of the ceasefire escalating out of control and scoopering any deal. So very interesting when we look at all of these developments. Okay, meanwhile, when we look over at the Times of Israel, this is an article from the Times of Israel today. White House, the United States-Iran negotiators have agreed to the MOU, but Trump's approval is still needed. U.S. official says president wants a couple days before deciding. Iran says it also hasn't given a final okay. MOU extends truce by 60 days, opens Hormuz to unrestricted traffic, launches talks on nuclear sites. So, very interesting. The White House on Thursday confirmed the U.S. and Iran negotiators have reached an agreement on memorandum of understanding that will extend an ongoing ceasefire by 60 days, during which the sides would hold talks on curbing Tehran's nuclear program. However, a statement attributed to U.S. sources that the White House sent to querying reports clarified that U.S. President Donald Trump still needs to sign off on the MOU. A Channel 12 report, which was confirmed by the White House, quoted a U.S. official as having said that Trump wants to take a couple of days to think about it before deciding whether to approve the MOU. However, a diplomat from one of the countries involved in the mediating process told the Times of Israel that the Channel 12 report mischaracterized the state of negotiations and that a final okay from Iran was still needed as well. Iran's semi-official Tasnim news outlet cited a source close to Tehran's negotiating team who was also denied in the Islamic Republic had actually given its final approval of the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding. The source claimed that the text of the agreement was still being finalized and that Iran would publicly announce its approval if and when it comes. Israel did not issue an official response to Thursday's developments, but Channel 12 cited senior Israeli sources who also maintained that Jerusalem has seen no intention that Iranian Supreme Leader Mojtaba Khamenei has approved the terms and that, therefore, Trump has nothing to approve at this stage. Even Channel 12 report appeared to hedge, first citing a very senior American source who said the terms of the MOU were agreed to by all levels of the Iranian leadership before clarifying that we will have to see whether Khamenei has indeed approved it. It was unclear as to whether the White House decided to confirm the Axios report as means to pressure Iran to get on board or whether Tehran had indeed privately given its approval of the MOU but was holding off on a public announcement until Trump gives his own authorization. Hormuz reopens, nuclear talks commence. The Axios reports, confirmed by the White House, offered details of the MOU that were largely the same as those leaked earlier this week after Trump on Sunday declared that a deal was nearly complete. In addition to the 60-day extension of the ceasefire, which brought a halt to the U.S.-Israeli war against Iran after 40 days of fighting that began on February 28, The White House confirmed Channel 12 report said that MOU will reopen the Strait of Hormuz to unrestricted passage of ships. Iran began obstructing traffic through key maritime channel shortly after coming under U.S. and Israeli attacks, holding global shipping hostage as a means to pressure adversaries to end the conflict. Under the reported terms of the deal, Washington will ease its naval blockade on Iranian ports in parallel with Tehran restoring full international shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. will commit to a negotiation, broader sanctions relief, and the release of frozen Iranian funds, while temporarily suspending some sanctions during the 60-day period to allow Iran to resume unrestricted oil exports. Negotiations over Tehran's nuclear program will commence during the ceasefire extension, with the first issues on the agenda to focus on disposal of Iran's highly enriched uranium stockpile and the future limits on its uranium enrichment. Iran will also formally commit not to pursue nuclear weapons, according to the report confirmed by the White House. This is not yet seen as a major concession for Iran, as it has long insisted that it does not seek to obtain a nuclear weapon. However, the Trump administration and Israel have not accepted this assurance to date, pointing to Tehran's enrichment of uranium to weapons-grade levels and the construction of its nuclear facilities deep underground. The ceasefires will also apply to Lebanon, although Israel would be free to counter immediate threats by Hezbollah. This would effectively maintain the status quo, where there is technically a ceasefire in place, but Israel maintains a growing buffer zone in southern Lebanon and exchanges fire with Hezbollah on a daily basis, while largely, but not entirely, avoiding attacks in Beirut as the request of the U.S. So this is really what we're looking at here. Ultimately, lots of information that is being dispersed today, lots of big stories that are coming out. Again, this is a statement from Prime Minister Netanyahu today as well. Netanyahu said, "We are now in 60% of the Gaza Strip, more or less. We have at 50%. Now we've moved to 60%. The directive is to move to, audience 100, 100. Netanyahu, wait, let's go in order. First 70%, let's start with that." So again, this is a statement from Prime Minister Netanyahu regarding the Lebanese territory and everything that we're seeing with that war. So again, we have a multi-domain war here, and we're just really tracking all of these different patterns and what these world leaders are really saying. So again, Netanyahu is essentially saying that they've taken 60% of Lebanon or Gaza. And then everybody basically says that let's take all of it. Very interesting. And my apologies, I had said Lebanon. I meant to say the Gaza Strip, more or less, okay? So again, Netanyahu said we are now in 60% of the Gaza Strip, more or less. We were at 50%. Now we're moved to 60%. And my directive is to move to, and then the audience says 100%, 100%. And then Netanyahu says, well, let's focus on 70%. So very big developments here, very big statements by Prime Minister Netanyahu on that front. Meanwhile, China-linked spy site expansion in Cuba raises alarms near key U.S. military bases. This is also a story, so
Cuba's
we'll look at this as well.
Calling out Secretary of State Marco Rubio, accusing him of lying to Americans to justify actions in Cuba.
Based on what logic? What would be the common sense behind the idea that Cuba could threaten a nuclear superpower? Second, we will have to ask the Secretary of State if he has any evidence. I have heard him lying on and on regarding this issue.
The foreign minister is also claiming the indictment of former President Raul Castro was done for a political narrative and to support possible military action against the communist country. Castro is charged with murder for Cuba's deadly shoot-down of humanitarian planes back in 1996.
That's very important to notice, again, all of these different stories that are developing, okay? So at the same time, we also have more Russian news. Ukraine-Russia war latest. EU's top diplomat warns against walking into Kremlin's trap as ministers meet for talks. So here's another video really describing the events happening there.
On the battlefield. With new intelligence.
He knew some information that...
And, of course, an advertisement just randomly interrupts me. That's amazing. What the hell?
You are half naked.
So annoying.
Online. To prove this,
so annoying.
we invited...
Okay, back to what I was trying to watch.
Russian soldiers
That's crazy. Now we're getting like hat. That's awesome.
The conflict began.
Very interesting.
In this volatile world, there are steps we can all take to protect our communities and our loved ones.
1 second, they're a neighbor you like. The next,
okay, we're just going to go to the news
trust.
story. Not supposed to know about that, apparently.
1 second.
Anyways, we're going to go on with some more news. Don't know what happened there. Always getting some weird stuff happening. ABC tells FCC its early review of broadcast licenses chills free speech, an extraordinary demonstration of power and coercion. So again, when we look at this story, this is also huge. The Walt Disney Company and ABC are once again pushing back on the FCC, this time over the agency's demand that it file early renewal applications for its broadcast license, a move that the company calls a threat to the First Amendment. It is an extraordinary demonstration of power and coercion directed at disfavored editorial voices, which sends a clear warning to every broadcaster in America. Ads. The company said in a filing with the agency on Thursday, along its renewal applications for 8 of its stations. This is a threat to the First Amendment that the commission and this proceeding must not be permitted to normalize. So again, big story there. Again, definitely a battle for, information control and everything that we're going to see. That's what you're going to see when it comes to open source information and intelligence. You're going to always see that suppression of information. There's always going to be the suppression of news, especially real-time information.
Meanwhile, Japan is urgently deploying troops right to the Russian border to the island of
Big story
Hokkaido.
here
The
as
South
well.
China Morning Post writes that Tokyo is seriously afraid that Russia will open a second front in the Far East. And not without reason, Moscow has stationed Su-35 fighters and anti-ship missiles on the disputed Kuril Islands. In the spring, it showcased Kinzhal missiles on aircraft near the Japanese shores. And Borei-class nuclear submarines, each carrying up to 160 warheads, are increasingly patrolling the Sea of Okhotsk. Just in the first 9 months of last year, Japan scrambled fighters for interception 448 times, almost twice a day. A country that, by constitution, does not have the right to offensive weapons is now developing missiles for retaliatory strikes and doubling its defense budget. This is the most tense standoff between Japan and Russia since the end of the Cold War. And it's happening right now, before our eyes, while everyone is watching Ukraine and Iran.
So again, when we look at that, Russia and Japan are facing a lot of different contentions as well. So this world war is impacting everybody. It is truly a World War III from what we are looking at when it comes to all of the different stories. Russia deployment of Typhoon systems threatens our interests.
This is news coming in from Moscow. Russia's foreign ministry says that allowing U.S. missile systems to be deployed on Japanese territory as part of military drills will threaten the security of Russia's eastern borders. The foreign ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova says, and I quote, Russia regards Japan's provision of its territory for the deployment of U.S. Typhoon missile systems for the duration of military exercises as a step that threatens Russia's far eastern borders.
So again, did you hear that? They said U.S. Typhoon missile systems on the Japanese-Russian border, that eastern border. So what do you think is happening? Again, we're hitting Russia from all fronts, the United States, it appears, because we have the Ukraine war that is hitting Russia from the east, or from the west, and then we have Japan hitting them from the east coast. So now Russia is getting hit on both sides. We have the Kremlin in Moscow, which is Western Russia essentially, being targeted, again, under the proxy of the United States' Army Ukraine. And again, that's really that's what's been being funded a lot by Lindsey Graham and a lot of the different individuals around Trump, the Trump administration. And again, they are using Ukraine as a proxy to fight Russia. At the same time, in Japan, same thing. The United States has a lot of control over the Japanese territories and a lot of our weapons, and we have a lot of different military bases who are there. And again, what did they just say? U.S. Typhoon missile systems are being basically being strategically placed right on that border of Russia. So both sides now of Russia are being hit. And again, it's by U.S. proxies, Japan and Russia, or Japan and Ukraine.
Far eastern borders. Zakharova says that Moscow had repeatedly informed Tokyo of its concerns that any deployment of missiles in Japan had a serious negative impact on the stability and security of the Asia-Pacific region and poses a direct threat to their far eastern frontiers. Reports also indicate the U.S. Armed Forces plans to deploy Typhoon systems to the Japanese Self-Defense Forces Kanoya Air Base in the Kagoshima Prefecture during drills set to last from June to September this year. The exercise will also involve the deployment of HIMARS rocket launchers.
So again, the United States is essentially using Ukraine and Japan as a proxy to basically hit Russia on both fronts. Okay, the Western and the Eastern fronts essentially are being dominated by the United States, and our own militaries and our bases essentially are overstepping our boundaries. And so it's going to be interesting to see how that develops over time with those stories. So how is this all affecting the markets? Well, the oil prices went down today. So again, despite all of the unpredictability and despite all of the uncertainty of this entire Iran war, Russia, Ukraine, and then we have Israel, Lebanon, all these different multi-domain and multi-front wars being fought, at the end of the day, WTI crude is at $88.75. Brent crude is at $93.31. Murban crude is at $93.31, and natural gas is at $3.30. So that's very interesting as you see the natural gas average go up from the past couple weeks, and then the other crude oil companies going down. So what does that tell you? Insurers are starting to feel a little bit better about where things are heading, but at the same time, again, you have to look at the maritime traffic, which we're going to be looking at shortly. But how did this all affect the stock market? Rising prices take center stage as Fed's preferred inflation measure heated up further in April. So again, here's more on that.
On a year-over-year basis, as hot as expected. And we're talking about PCE specifically. 3.8% headline, 3.3% core. So not only do you have that, you have, and this is for the month of April, personal spending in April up 0.5%, income flat. Yeah. Okay. Then on top of that, you also have GDP for the first quarter being revised lower from 2% to 1.6%. So yes, it's still growth. Yes, it's still going, but we have economist after economist come on here and say things are going well. I guess you can still characterize it that way, but these numbers help explain why people don't feel like things are going well.
The Fed has a major inflation problem.
I mean, it is inflation.
That's all there is to it. That headline shock has sort of shined a brighter light on the fact that the core inflation story was stalling out even 6 months ago. That we weren't getting that progress, meaningful progress towards 2%. The problem now is it's very clearly going the other way, both on core and headline measures. It's going to be a major challenge for the Fed over the next several months.
The Fed's not going to hike unless something substantial changes. However,
I don't know about that.
The Fed's also obviously not going to cut. Probably not going to cut this year. Who knows how long it'll last into next year. Even though the market has been increasingly pricing in a hike, I find it difficult to see that happening.
You know what the odds are of a rate hike by the end of the year?
What?
51%.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more and more challenging to ignore a 30-year at 5%. To me, the biggest data has now flipped from labor market data back to inflation data. So we'll get the jobs report next Friday. I think the CPI number in the middle of next month, which is going to be right before the next Fed meeting, that's the bigger number. I just think that story where it was so labor focused late 24 into 25 as the AI.
I mean, ultimately, all of this depends on the trajectory of this Iran war and Trump's statements. Trump's statements appear to be balancing the entire global economy at the moment.
Boom kind of started to take its shape. And the way that Powell was really talking about labor over inflation, that is really the story to me that has most materially flipped the last few months.
When you're talking about AI too, it feels like I know that Warsh has made the case and many economists made the case that eventually you're going to get this productivity surge that will help the economy, help cap inflation. But for now, AI certainly seems to be inflationary, right? I mean, I think we can pretty clearly say what we've seen with memory prices, construction costs, et cetera. It's not helping the inflation picture.
And again, more AI data centers, in my opinion, are really not going to be the solution. I mean, the GDP, the entire future GDP of the United States is relied upon with these AI data centers. And we're not even putting them offshore, which we could be. And so that's definitely going to be a problem. Meanwhile, we also have the crypto markets. which again, the fear and greed index, a little bit worse than yesterday. Yesterday, we were at 34 with the fear and greed index, and today we're at 33. So people are becoming more afraid again to invest their money into these new emerging markets, which is, again, crypto, Bitcoin, Ethereum, XRP. Probably you're going to be your biggest movers upon the signing of the Clarity Act, which, again, Scott Bessent made statements today saying that they need to pass the Clarity Act. So we'll see what happens, but July 4th is the next markup date, and we've been following that. Hyperliquid appears to continue going up as this is a kind of, building up the entire prediction markets. And then all these other currencies too. So when we look at the crypto market, we're kind of still at a standstill. And so we will see where things continue going. But let's look at the prediction markets. Okay, U.S. versus Iran permanent peace deal. So let's look at what everybody else is saying. So 77% of people believe that this entire peace deal is going to not happen. Okay, so ultimately when we look at this, they say by December 31st, 77% of people believe that there will be a peace deal by then. Okay, 59% of people believe that 59% of people believe that on July 31st there will be some kind of peace deal. So we'll see what happens. We're following it. Then 41% of people believe that June 30th there will be a peace deal between Iran. 29% of people will believe it will be June 15th. 21% of people believe it will be June 7th. And 11% of people believe it will be May 31st of this month. Those predictions don't appear to be working out too well, but we'll see, because it seems like we are getting close, but then there's always this back and forth, and it seems like, according to what we're seeing with Israel, they are not really in a position where they want to end the war at this time. Because, again, when we look at the Abraham Accords and when we look at these peace agreements that have been being made between Trump and the UAE, Saudi Arabia, all these other countries are willing to sign, Jordan, Kuwait. But then again, it comes back to Prime Minister Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and they're saying that they want to continue this war, as well as the Lebanon war, and then as well as Gaza. So we will see what happens, but it all depends on where these world leaders are really going to decide and who is really going to determine that future of all of this. Very complicated to know that. We can't predict it, but you have to be careful about those prediction markets. Gold prices right now is $4,493.10 per ounce for gold, and silver's at $75.79 per ounce. And then when we look at the maritime traffic, let's actually take a look at the Strait of Hormuz. So when we take a closer look at the strait and everything that's going on with that, it's very interesting to see kind of where we're at with it. Okay, because again, you can see that there's still congestion and there's not a lot of flow through the Strait of Hormuz, but it looks like we have more coming through than yesterday. We still have anchored ships here near Fujairah, which is not good. You got a lot of red dots here, which means these are crude oil tankers, and you have the green, which are mostly shipping containers, LNG, which is your liquefied natural gas containers. So that can pretty much tell us the story that insurers are still risk assessing, and they're not feeling too hot about it. Okay, we also have Qatar, a lot of congestion and clustering in this area as well, and then clustering happening just north of Dammam. So again, north of the Persian Gulf, same thing, same story. We've been seeing these ships pretty much in this same spot since the beginning of this week. Really, since Monday, we've been seeing these anchored crude oil tankers and all of these different ships. These oil products tankers or crude oil tankers, all pretty much at a standstill here. Then when we look at Karg Island, which is what Trump has had his eyes on, again, mostly for purposes of energy. This is a big importing and exporting zone for energy for the Iranians. Trump has wanted to take Karg Island for a while. Well, you don't see a lot of action happening around that island. And mostly the ships that you're seeing are usually fishing vessels, which oftentimes are used as attack vessels. Sometimes they're just actually regular fishing vessels. We don't know. But what we do know is that when we look at all of the different ships in the area, these are all Iranian. Okay, we have an unspecified ship here. Perhaps that could be a fighter boat. And you see a lot of this same stuff happening. Okay, you have cargo containers, and again, more allies of the Iranian regime, general cargo. And so looks like the Iranians do have some kind of stronghold over all of this. Okay, we look at these different crude oil tankers. We have a British or an Australian oil chemical tanker here. So the question is, what is really over here? Well, you have a lot of different resources on the Persian Gulf here when we're looking at this area. Okay, so again, when we look at this, got to be careful about what you're looking at. And then you look at the Red Sea, and we look at the Strait of Hormuz, same kind of deal. So we have limited flow through the Suez Canal and the Red Sea. Again, we have very limited flow through. Then when we go north of this, we still have a lot of clustering in Port Said, which is right here, just north of the Suez Canal and the Red Sea, where a lot of trade happens. You still have flow through, but it's just very limited. As we've been showing pretty much for the past few weeks now, we've been tracking a lot of the shipping routes and everything and all of these different patterns. Okay, we still have traffic going north and south in the Red Sea, a little bit less. We have more clustering here, but more movement, which means there is trade happening. There are crude oil tankers that are docking here and getting resources here. But at the end of the day, we also have to be careful and realize that things are limited. And this is still an extremely dangerous zone. When you see the clustering of these red ships, you basically know that the insurers are not really feeling very good about where things are heading with this entire war. Okay, this is the Bab el-Mandeb Strait that we're looking at now. And again, this entire choke point is also important because this is where you're getting a lot of that flow through into the Red Sea and then up to Cyprus, north of Saudi Arabia and Israel. Okay. Another way to tell where this entire Iran war is going, as long as we see congestion at the southern Horn of Africa here, the Cape of Good Hope, essentially right here, as long as we keep having congestion and there's continued flow through around this entire southern tip, as we've been discussing for weeks now, again, that tells us that this Iran war is continuing on. Okay, then we also have to look at the maritime traffic near Israel, also important to note. Again, not a lot of activity just north of Gaza here, but we do have more traffic near Tel Aviv. So it appears that there's normal trade happening here. And then when we go a little bit more northbound to Lebanon, same deal. We have Tyre here, or Tyre, one of the oldest civilizations in Lebanon, southern Lebanon, which was actually just struck a few days ago. When we zoom in on it, we might see something. Doesn't look like they really updated much of this. But still, again, very important to notice. So again, when we look at all of this, very important to see all of the developments happening here. Okay, not a lot of trade happening in this area. So that tells us that there is probably more occupation happening in that southern border of Lebanon. Very interesting. And then, of course, we have Cyprus, which is always important to pay attention to because this is a big trade route for the European Union and the United States. Okay, so a lot of trade is still happening in this area for now. Kind of a secondary zone for a lot of things that are going on when it comes to this war. Then we also have the flight tracker, which we like to keep up on what's really happening with all of this. So very important to pay attention to this as well. What's happening with the flights? Some of the most important flights people are tracking every day. It consists of these flights. So again, I was tracking this flight today, and ultimately this was coming from a little bit Saudi Arabia area. And the map isn't loading, of course. That's awesome. But ultimately, there we go. Just kind of waiting on that. When we look at where this flight started from, it started near, it looked like Jordan, Kuwait, kind of this area. Or Israel, it looked like, Israel. And then now, this flight is almost to the Strait of Hormuz. And it looks like they're just going in circles. So I thought this was really an interesting observation for this flight tracking. Again, it's being tracked by 1,183 people right now, but apparently this is the U.S. Air Force, and this looks like a C-130. But it came from Tel Aviv. We don't really know where it's going. So where is this going? Again, this is a U.S. Air Force flight. Why are they going in circles? What is the point? That tells us that there's not a lot of safe travelway over the Strait of Hormuz, not a lot of safe airspace happening in that Strait of Hormuz area. So again, we will continue tracking that flight over the time to come, but always important to analyze what's kind of going on there. Again, that was, that doesn't really tell us exactly what kind of flight that is, but that's why I thought that was an interesting flight. Came directly from Tel Aviv. So could that be Netanyahu? Could that be forces being sent from, could that be U.S. forces being sent from the U.S. Air Force? Are they being exported to these zones? Again, just going in circles. So what is really going on here? Where are they going? we know that we can see that they're pretty close to Syria Island here. And that's interesting. So that tells us a little bit of a story. Why are they going in circles is the question. So probably not really safe airspace for the U.S. Air Force to be up there. It's always important to pay attention to these things. Again, the S&P 500 and NASDAQ close at new records lifted by tech rally. Live updates. Yeah, so we looked at that. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ composite closed at records on Thursday as tech resumed its leadership and traders weighed a reported agreement between U.S. and Iranian negotiators to extend the ceasefire. So we will see if that even happens. A lot of this seems like it's more talk. Okay, but then we have our featured story that I was very curious about. So we're going to watch this 5-minute clip. Peter Thiel relocated to Argentina due to concerns over the direction of the United States' future and is already hosting dinners with local economists about the Antichrist. Theil will live in Buenos Aires, most exclusive neighborhoods where he could be offered permanent residence over even citizenship. Theil may view Argentina as a testing ground for dark enlightenment, which says societies should be governed by corporations. Very weird. Very interesting here. So let's take a look at this clip.
Words I no longer believe. A storm is rolling in over Argentina. The man who wrote the words I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. A billionaire that champions many of the ideals central to the philosophy known as the Dark Enlightenment.
Now, I think this is interesting, too, because Peter Thiel is the guy who pretty much built a lot of the American economy that we see today. You could call it, a lot of people will call it big tech. A lot of people will call it the tech oligarchy. You have all these different companies like Palantir who are really coordinating the future of this war, this Iran war. These companies like Palantir are really covering all of this. And now Peter Thiel wants to say, oh, I don't really trust America anymore. Well, it's like, weren't you a big part of building what we currently have in this country today? So, and now he wants to flee to Argentina. And again, when we've been looking at Argentina, we have the Patagonian forests, which have been being burnt down, it seems. And again, Javier, the prime minister of Argentina right now, he's basically already said that they've been leaving that open for future tourists from Israel to flee to. So very interesting. These are kind of just developments I've observed over the past few weeks, and not making any insinuations here, but the reason this is important to track is because, again, Peter Thiel is the guy who built a lot of our current economic system in America,
which views democracy as a failed experiment. He built a company that tracks, monitors, and targets human beings all over the world. Peter Thiel just bought the most expensive house in Buenos Aires for $12 million. But why has he come to Argentina? And what might this mean for the country's future?
Again, he quoted, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. So again, here's the full little quote here, but I must confess that over the last 2 decades, I have changed radically on the question of how to achieve these goals. Most importantly, I no longer believe that freedom and democracy are compatible. By tracing out the development of my thinking, I hope to frame some of the challenges faced by all classical liberals today. The critical question then becomes one of means of how to escape, not via politics, but yet beyond it. Because there are no truly free places left in our world, Peter Thiel said. I suspect that the mode for escape must involve some sort of new and hitherto untried process that leads us to some undiscovered country. And for this reason, I have focused my efforts on new technologies that may create a new space for freedom. Let me briefly speak to 3 such technological frontiers. Choices of individuals may still be paramount. The fate of our world may depend on the effort of a single person who builds or propagates the machinery of freedom that makes the world safe for capitalism. Strange statement, perhaps. What do you guys think?
So why has Peter Thiel bought the most expensive house in Buenos Aires? Why is he here? The first possible explanation is that he might just like the area. Palermo Chico is the most exclusive neighborhood in Buenos Aires, and Thiel's massive 17,200 square foot home is right here in the middle of it. Now, I'd never usually stand outside of somebody's home and film it, but I didn't feel too bad in this case, given Thiel's affinity for surveillance. He's the co-founder and chairman of the board of Palantir, and has a net worth of $30 billion. For him, buying this home is like someone with a net worth of $100,000 buying a home for just $40. Perhaps he just did it because he could, but given the current political situation here in Argentina, this strikes me as unlikely. The second possible explanation is that Thiel sees Argentina as a fertile ground to sow the seeds of the Dark Enlightenment. He's a prominent financial backer and key figure of this Silicon Valley-born philosophy that argues democracy has failed and that society would be better run as if it were a tech startup, meaning one founder at the top making unilateral decisions with no need to ask voters for permission. Thiel has spent millions and millions funding like-minded politicians in the US. Here in Argentina, Milei is already at the top of government and is currently running the most radical libertarian experiment on earth. The both of them are self-described anarcho-capitalists. Back in his ominous 2009 essay, The Education of a Libertarian, Thiel wrote, "The fate of our world may depend on the effort of a single person who builds or propagates the machinery of freedom that makes the world safe for capitalism." So maybe he sees Milei as a key ingredient in his recipe to save the world.
Peter Thiel.
The third and final, fairly simple explanation. There's just huge amounts of money to be made for Thiel and Palantir in Argentina. His flourishing ideological friendship with Milei could open many doors for him in the near future. Palantir has made huge sums of money operating at the heart of US intelligence, which uses its software for population monitoring, tracking migrants, and of course, for war. Argentina recently created a new AI security unit, and Milei also just signed an AI collaboration deal with Israel. Thiel named Palantir after Palantiri, the all-seeing stones from Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, which allow users to see events happening in other times and places. As one of the co-founders of PayPal and the first outside investor in Facebook, Thiel has a knack for spotting opportunities early on. So what might this all mean for Argentina? Well, the country is being run by a president who worships the free market. Real estate here is currently about 80% cheaper than New York and London. There's very little tech regulation and a time zone that overlaps with the US East Coast. According to numerous reports, more of Thiel's associates and colleagues might be on the way, as they're looking at properties across the city. So will Buenos Aires become the new hub for Silicon Valley capital? History has shown time and time again that US interests in Latin America are bad news for the people of this region. But Argentina has weathered far worse storms than tech billionaires playing at being supervillains. 30,000 people were murdered or disappeared by the military dictatorship that took power here just 50 years ago. Argentinians have not forgotten what happens when their democracy is threatened, and they will fight tooth and nail to defend it. With his fundamentally anti-democratic beliefs, I don't think Peter Thiel will be a popular new neighbor in Buenos Aires.
We will see. At the end of the day, yes, it is interesting how a lot of the tech billionaires and the Silicon Valley crew, they're moving to Argentina, not just because of the different economical, gains for them, but also look at where it's close to, Antarctica. If you look on a globe, Argentina is right next to Antarctica. It's just north of Antarctica. And so if they have control over that land, then how easily could they take control of Antarctica? And so if I had $1 billion or plus, I would absolutely be thinking the same way, just me, myself. So it's very interesting to see where things are going. We'll see what happens with Peter Thiel and all of this, but to say the least, it's very interesting. Again, this is from the New York Times, who originally reported this, that Peter Thiel is now moving to Argentina because he's worried about America's future not being aligned anymore with its leadership, the man who helped build the infrastructure of American power and everything that we see today, even the funding of J.D. Vance, and today he's a big backer of J.D. Vance. A lot of people don't know that. And here he's leaving. Now he's just leaving. And now he's blaming everybody else. Very interesting. But again, that is just an opinion. But when we look at all of this, quite interesting to see. Okay, and so again, let's just look at some bookmarks that I thought were interesting here. The White House posted yesterday, "There's no place like the United States of America worth protecting." I thought that's true. It's definitely true. This was funny. Spent 15 years grooming J.D. Vance. Pour $15 million into J.D.'s Senate run. Get J.D. installed as vice president. Worst vice president in American history. He considers not even running in 2028. Flee to Argentina to defeat defeat with your husband. So again, Peter Thiel, if a lot of people didn't know, he's gay. So again, kind of funny post there. So again, this is Secretary of War Pete Hegseth. This is 5 hours ago. So let's take a look at this video. This is Hegseth essentially promoting the Iran war and saying how important it is that America first equals more troops. I don't really know about that.
The United States has the greatest military
What do you
the
think?
world has ever known. But not just because we have the best jets, the best ships, and the best weapon systems, but because our greatest asset is the American warfighter. For too long, Washington has not done enough for the Americans, who make our military the most lethal fighting force in history. Under President Trump, that changes right now. This budget is about our people. Because let's be honest about the reality on the ground.
The defense budget.
We ask our troops to
so
leave
more
their-
spending for military, more spending and defense spending for the military, for more troops, for uniforming, more officers, and at the end of the day, really what happens is America first equals more troops, according to Pete Hegseth, for this Iran war. So what does this mean? Why would he put this video out? Well, obviously that tells you that this war is likely to continue if the Secretary of War is going to basically put this out himself. Clearly, this doesn't appear to be de-escalation talk or a de-escalation ad. It appears to be a military ad, a "We want you" U.S. Army ad.
Families to deploy and
So what does that
train
tell
in
you?
the
The
most
war will
complex
probably
threat
continue.
environments since World War II. But when they return to duty, they're met with outdated facilities, substandard barracks, and too often, straight-up hazardous living conditions.
So the American
On top of
taxpayers,
that,
you're going to have to pay for that.
Before this administration, we had young enlisted families relying on food pantries just to get by. This is, of course, completely unacceptable for the greatest fighting force in the world. Our troops should never be and will never be on food stamps. With this president in charge, no more. Things are changing fast. As part of our generational $1.5 trillion budget, we're making an aggressive, historic
$1.5 trillion budget. But yet we don't have enough money to secure the southern border. We don't have enough money to afford that $5,000 tax cuts, or that $5,000 checks that Trump was promising the American people and the average middle class worker. Nope, don't have enough money for that. But we have $1.5 trillion somehow of money that they continue printing at the Fed. So that way you can pay for it as the American taxpayer. So it just goes to show this is what the American taxpayer is going to pay for. And ultimately, without crypto and this Clarity Act being signed in this new emerging asset class, there's really no hope for the United States economically and financially in the case that, again, how are we going to afford this? This is always, they can just pump out $1.5 trillion from the American taxpayer. And ultimately, that's what it's all going to come down to. Again, short sales on real estate. It's going to come down to essentially credit card debts and people who can't pay those. So it's going to be really rough in the future, really just to fund this entire Iran war, which appears to be continuing.
investment in military infrastructure by spending $90 billion on revitalized barracks and facilities.
And by the way, I have nothing against spending money on the United States military. That's great. We should have a powerful military. We should always have the most powerful military on earth, 100%. But at the same time, if it is a war that strategically and militarily we may not even be able to win, and it might just be a 20-year war, again, which this ad seems to be suggesting that this war is going to go on. It's going to be a long war. Very interesting.
Money will get rid of all substandard and failing barracks. But housing, it's only half the battle. This budget includes the largest pay raise for our troops in modern history, up to 7% for junior enlisted, and pay raises
7%.
for everyone in the force. We're also investing over $35 billion into the support systems that our military families rely on every single day. This budget fully funds military health care, finally making TRICARE more desirable than Medicare. We're investing in child care and youth programs, upgraded commissaries, and better military schools. And that's why this budget also provides record funding for the PCS task force and spousal employment programs to ensure a smoother moving process the way it should be.
They really want you signing up and for this entire, they really just want more soldiers. You know, that's what it's all about.
Taking care of our troops isn't about just doing the right thing. It's about military readiness.
These guys are going to make like $200,000 a year just because they need people in the military.
That's why we're asking our partners in Congress to work with us to pass this historic budget and generational investment. Because, as you know, our troops have already written.
And now they're taking the America First motto and subverting it
good
for only war.
Our end of the deal. America's warriors fight for us. This budget is fighting for them.
Oh, God. I don't really know if this is I disagree that this is America First because, again, America First is taking anything in the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Greenland, which those are the countries we should be focusing on. Anything outside of that, like Iran, a population of 90 million people, all of their nuclear bunkers are far underground, miles underground, and ultimately, again, we haven't been doing so well, and they can just keep they're only 6 months behind, and again, they can just keep on rebuilding all of their FPV drones, their entire anti-missile drone systems, everything. It won't take them long to rebuild it. So militarily, tactically, and strategically, not really that wise for us to be in this war. But they continue insisting that we need more U.S. troops in this war.
Millions of people are about to lose their jobs or will be forced to change their areas of employment. Whole professions might go extinct, replaced, when humans will be replaced by artificial intelligence.
When humans will be replaced. Keywords there.
To automation, preparing and analyzing documents, writing code, AI is already replacing junior specialists. And in the near future, it looks well poised to replace middle personnel. This process is irreversible and inevitable. Progress is not...
Translation, AI is going to take your job. It's irreplaceable. It's inevitable. Deal with it.
Standing still. And we must be ready for upcoming changes.
These world leaders truly don't have an affinity for humanity.
Accelerated economic growth, diseases.
Anything to just make AI take over everything. It's going to be rough. We're definitely heading into a future where automation is going to turn the human into a robot. This is the beginning of merging of man with machine, truly. The Terminator 2 future is coming, and they are building it.
Some breaking news. Iran has bombed the American military base.
Oh, we already watched this.
Kuwait.
Let's see what else there is. Again, we checked that out. Ukrainian soldier records what he thinks will be his final video as his unit is surrounded by Russian forces. Look at his eyes. Look at the eyes of the soldier. You will feel this video. So very interesting. So again, apparently these guys are surrounded by Russian troops. Pretty much know it's the end, apparently. Very sad. This is the consequence of war. Again, we're just covering videos from the Ukrainian military right now, documenting what they believe to be their last video. So again, just a little bit of that. So very interesting. Again, this is Nick Fuentes. Israel remains the only country obstructing peace in the Middle East. This is from Nick Fuentes' clip. So this was going pretty viral on X. So we'll take a look at this clip real quick.
If Israel gave Palestine a state, they could normalize with Saudi Arabia, and then we could leave the Middle East. Because then we could just have our bases there. They could share intelligence. They could do their joint training drills and operations and everything else, and they could balance against Iran. But Israel will not allow there to be a Palestinian state, even though that's our position also. Same story in Lebanon. What is even the problem in Lebanon? Lebanese government has passed a law that they will disarm Hezbollah. I'm sure that if we really made the effort, we could go in and get Hezbollah disarmed. If there was some commitment by Israel to respect the sovereignty of Palestine, Lebanon, and Syria, maybe if they left the Golan Heights, maybe then you wouldn't have a Hezbollah problem. But no, Israel insists on invading Lebanon. And this goes up to and including, by the way, these domestic concerns with Palestinian statehood. You got millions of Palestinians there living there. Israel would rather genocide them, kick them out, send them to Somaliland or Western Sahara or, wherever, rather than just give them some form of civilian governance. Figure out some kind of security architecture that they could live with, and there's a two-state solution. Every single one of these problems goes back to this. And this is when you realize you could talk all day long about the centrifuges and enrichment and the Strait and all these issues. It's never going to get solved unless you rein in the rogue nuclear state, which is Israel. That's it. That's your entire problem. Every other aspect of it, these other countries are willing to make a deal. We have leverage over them. We use it all the time. You have play, you have leverage with Syria, with the Saudis, with the Iranians, with the Qataris. For whatever reason, it is this other one country which seems to be unwilling to cooperate.
And so again, that was a clip from Nick Fuentes from his show that had been going viral on Twitter X. And again, the reason I played that is just because that is somebody else's take, and he's been analyzing the entire Israel war for a long time. Again, I don't necessarily agree that it's a genocide or anything like that, but ultimately at the same time, we have to analyze all people's perspectives, okay, especially people who have been following that war for a long time. Okay, so interestingly enough, this is also footage from Russia. Again, some of their nuclear missiles coming out of the ground here. Kind of cool. Pretty cool. Pretty wild. So loud. Crazy, though. And this is the same setup in Iran, by the way. Iran has a very similar setup where it comes from the ground, like underground. A lot of their nuclear missiles or missiles in general, they are coming from underground. So it's hard to just go and, you know, attack these geographical locations and to just actually wipe out the program when it's like a lot of this is far, far, far beneath the ground floor, right? This is from Elon Musk 3 hours ago. Cybercabs driving itself to the Giga factory. Again, the iRobot future is being built. I don't know why every time I talk about that, apparently you're not supposed to talk about that, but that is the future that's being built. They want the iRobot future, and even the cars look the same as the movie, iRobot with Will Smith. I mean, honestly, very interesting to see, though. And again, these are all autonomous vehicles, so we'll see what happens with the autonomous vehicle market, but going to be interesting to see how it all plays out for sure. So again, see a lot of these in Las Vegas when you go there too. So again, this is another clip from Netanyahu. Germany is approaching us because it wants to rebuild its military. Europe now comes to us and wants us to protect them. Not something many Europeans would have imagined 20 years ago. And again, he's basically just saying that in Yiddish. So again, very interesting it is, though, because, you see how the tables have somewhat turned. Today in history, Napoleon was crowned king of Italy right here today in 1805. Beautiful. And again, why can't we bring back this architecture? The United States, we should have these kind of castles everywhere. We should have these kind of churches everywhere. Ultimately, this is the kind of architecture that we should bring back, and it should be glorified, and this is everything we could have. So that's absolute European excellence. And again, this is where Napoleon was crowned king of Italy in 1805. Very interesting time. So again, we looked at that. This is Lavrov, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. The topic of Epstein is to do with exposing the collective West and what is called the deep state. It's no longer a state, but a deep alliance that rules the West and is trying to rule the entire world. It's completely beneath human comprehension, and it is pure Satanism. Again, this is in the words of Sergei Lavrov of Russia. The topic has nothing to do with our diplomatic work. The topic has to do with exposing the face of what is called the collective West, and that is called the deep state, and now no longer a state, but a deep alliance that rules the entire West and is trying to rule the entire world. The fact that this is completely beneath human comprehension, that this is pure Satanism, probably does not need to be explained to a normal person. Very interesting. Yeah, so Russia is basically calling out the United States for what we've been up to. This is Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent confirming that the $250 bill with President Trump's face on it is already in the works. So let's look at this a little bit.
Again, as Treasury Secretary, I have two mandates for U.S. currency. At present, no living person can be on U.S. currency, and the currency must say, "In God we trust." So right now there is proposed legislation in front of the House, in front of the Senate, to change the first requirement so that a living person, Donald J. Trump, could be on a $250 bill. So it's all in the hands of
Very interesting.
It's all up on Capitol Hill. So
$250 bill. Now I think that's cool. I really like this.
So we have prepared in advance that if the legislation is passed, but we will stick to the law.
I think that's kind of badass. I mean, that is kind of cool, and I think we should have that for sure. Interesting. Meanwhile, same man here, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says there will be no central bank digital currency, adding that the most important thing we can do is to make digital assets come to the United States.
And the Clarity Act is now up on the Hill, and I think it has bipartisan support. And the most important thing we can do is to make digital assets come into the United States, make the U.S. the home. Our regulation, our best practices are what will ensure good standards for these. When you look at digital assets,
we need to have the Clarity Act
passed.
passed.
All the things you read about, that's because it's the wild, wild west offshore, so we got to bring it on shore.
It's a brand new market.
I would encourage the House and the Senate to get clarity done.
So again, good sign. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is pushing for that Clarity Act to be signed. And it's going to be huge for the United States, the economy. Got to enrich the economy if you're going to have a powerful empire, Trump. So you have to enrich the Americas. You have to enrich the newest emerging markets, or you're not going to have a powerful country, and we're not going to be able to afford this Iran war. So I do see that Clarity Act passing. They really have no choice, especially the banks. So again, this is from Alex Jones 6 hours ago. The IDF is now striking what it calls Hezbollah infrastructure in Lebanon, hitting the ancient coastal city of Tyre. Again, by this logic, if there was a bank robber hiding in a high-rise building, he is effectively using the structure as the infrastructure, so you can blow it up and killing everyone inside and claim you didn't commit a war crime. So again, this is from Alex Jones, but this is footage from Tyre, Lebanon. And this was accomplished by the Israelis. Sad to see, but this is the war. This is World War III, ladies and gentlemen. Again, this has been also going viral. ICE agent standing guard at Delaney Hall sports a Hulk green Rolex submariner over his "We the People" tattoo. That's kind of awesome. Dope. The Groyper curse, the Groyper look. This is what it is. Look at that Groyper over here. He's got the "We the People" tattoo. He's got the Rolex. Probably left his finance job just to show these anti-ICE protesters what's up. Love it. It's a good look. Badass. Keep on going, Border Patrol. Keep on going, ICE. So again, when we look at some of these other stories, 5 years into the Kiev in 3 days operation, Russia is now installing Pantsir air defense systems on the rooftops of office buildings in Moscow. Yeah, we talked about that yesterday and how the banks are also going to be doing this. Banks in Russia are going to be, in Ukraine, are going to be putting these anti-drone systems above on the roofs of their buildings. And now they're training their bankers to shoot down drones. Unbelievable. This is the future that we're walking into. You know, this is what we have to live with as society today. We have to put anti-drone systems on our rooftops if we're not going to get blown up. Very interesting. That's the world we're living in 2026. So again, meanwhile, all of these protests are continuing to happen. This is a tweet from Gregory Cabavino. He was the head of ICE before he was relieved of his duties. I don't know who's holding these guys back, but basic riot control starts with gas. Yes, 100%. You need tear gas. This should have never been over in 15. This should have been over in 15 minutes. We're now on day 3. Secretary Mullins in action is putting his own agents, the facility, and detain aliens at risk. Hesitation isn't compassion, it's dangerous weakness. 100%. So again, footage from New Jersey. These are the anti-ICE protests. And they are just letting these anti-ICE protesters do whatever they want. They are letting these anti-ICE protesters completely fight law enforcement, go against the laws of themselves, And these are all, again, committing total felonies. These are all felonies because these are police officers at the end of the day. And these people are completely resisting and obstructing. And they're getting in the way of all these different investigations that need to be happening. And they're even calling for the death of these ICE agents. So these people need to be in jail. All of these people at this protest should be in prison. That's common sense. Because, again, these federal agents are just doing what they have to do. These are all just cops. And a lot of people say, oh, they're feds. They're not cops. It's like, yeah, they're a level above police officers, actually. They're federal agents. They're a level above. So they actually have more authority, and they have more law enforcement rights. So, you know, it's like common sense would suggest that maybe you shouldn't fight against the cops and the ICE agents who are literally just doing their jobs to keep the country safe, to keep the borders safe. That's their job. May 28th, 1999. We'll end it with this video. After 2 decades of restoration work, Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper was reopened to the public in Milan. So very, very cool. We need to bring it back. We need to bring back the standards. Because ultimately, the future of America is Catholicism and Christianity. And it is Jesus Christ. He is the only way to truth. To truth, to peace, all of it lies in Christ. And it needs to be the future of America. There is no other way. Show the roulettes, guy. Refresh the screen. Oh, yeah, apparently you couldn't see the roulettes. We'll go back for a second. There we go. Let's see the Rolex. Zoom in more if I could. Can you see it? There's the Rolex of the ICE agent. So this is the Rolex of this ICE agent, looking like a boss. Total G. The Groiper outfit, the Groiper uniform. That's the future of it. Looks great. That's what it should be. There's the Rolex. Nice. Had to go back in the comments. Didn't see that you couldn't see it there. The camera was probably in the way. So anyways, that's all I have for you today. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and be sure to support the show. What do you guys think about where the war is going with Iran? What do you guys think about Peter Thiel moving to Argentina, escaping the United States? What do you think about the Israel-Lebanon siege and Gaza, all of that? What do you guys think about the Russia-Ukraine war, the imminent strikes on Kiev, and the warnings from Sergei Lavrov about the deep state in the United States, the Epstein crime syndicate, as which other people are being as which other people are calling it? What do you think about the maritime traffic patterns that we analyzed earlier in this episode? The flight tracking of the C-130 that was going in circles over the Persian Gulf. Lots of interesting things in this episode we were able to capture. So again, you thought it was interesting. Be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We'll be back maybe tomorrow, or just we'll come back Monday, and we'll cover all the news and everything that's happened since then. We'll be also posting more YouTube shorts. Be sure to watch all of my YouTube shorts. That gets a little bit more traction than the live stream, because these live streams tend to be a little bit more, I wouldn't say censored or suppressed, but for some reason, a lot of these stories are highly sensitive, and sometimes these live streams get flagged. So not a lot of viewers on these. Go into my YouTube shorts, though, and I cover a lot of what's happening in the modern news, and you'll be able to see some of the most trending videos. So again, be sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, support the information, and you can also watch this show on Spotify. You can watch on Rumble, where I upload these live streams there as well. And with that being said, I have nothing else. Be sure to, support the show and stay prudent, stay powerful, and stay wealthy. See you next time.